Starting the recording and done. Hey everyone, this is AC Bronyville Podcast. How you guys doing today? I have my friend, he's just going to go by Spilled Milk, I guess.
Yeah, hello everyone.
Yeah, local friend. We've been long, fast friends for probably about the past week. And we've decided to come in here. You had a weird interest / whatever in the new pony board game, or card game rather. So we decided that we'll set it up and we'll play this out and let you guys understand it a little bit more. We did a show / stream a few days ago where we crashed hard against this game's mechanics, and I think we've come out a little bit better and a little bit the wiser since then. So we should be able to not mess up as much in explaining how this game works.
But expect us to mess up.
Expect us probably to make some terrible, terrible mistakes that you will later scream in whatever comments you will look on this. But we should have this down for the most part. Should be good enough that you will be able to actually figure this out and be able to play it once we've done a game or two. So, let me go ahead and do this. Let me start off by introducing you to some of the cards that are actually out there. Now, unlike Magic, the basis of this game is not to directly defeat your opponent. The actual basis that you're trying to do is you're trying to score 15 points. The first card I'll actually show you, there's no images of it online, so let me go ahead and illustrate to you the score cards. So there are two cards here that come with every starter pack. The first one is just simply the turn card, which illustrates out what you can do during the game. So, for instance, pay 1 to draw a card, play 1 to play a Troublemaker, pay 2 to move characters, pay 2 to ready frightened characters, and pay the cost of a friend resource or even to play it. So that is just based off of this very glossy card because of that light up over there. Also at the bottom, you'll notice that there's some arrows that determine score. One of the things that happens is that where Magic you end up playing cards to gain mana as you go, the actual score, the highest score that someone has, determines how much energy or how much is on the table for people to play. So, for instance, if you're starting at the very beginning of the game and there's 0 points, 1 point, etc. between the whoever is the highest scorer at that point, that determines the point value. So, to try and show this to you the best way I can, if you have, for instance, 1 point, then you'll get 2 action points that you can use during the game to actually progress. Okay, you're not confused yet. It'll get better. Trust me. We're just starting. But as you progress onward, you'll end up getting more. So for instance, if you see here, 7, you get 4. Think 4 like 4 mana is the easiest way to kind of put it together in Magic terms. You're going to simply get more resources that you can use later on in the game. So, that is explaining this process. Now, how do you get the points? I have slides for that. These over here, over there, are problems. So, for instance, you have the top problem over there and the bottom problem over there. Yes, the second one is flipped over. There's a reason for that. So, what you have to do in these particular problems is that you have to meet a particular amount of resources on those cards. So, for instance, let's see, what do we have here? Alright, so that top one where you're looking at 4 pink and is that, yes, and you're looking at 3 white that you have to collect. So, with that, you need to have friends on the card that or friends or your main card that equal that number. You just have to place them there. Once you did it, you got it. You'll get points. We'll explain the points because those get a little crazy too. The reason the bottom one down there is flipped upside down is that I have my problem cards and he has his problem cards. Mine are going to be like the top card where it's very specific. I need pink and I need white. But That wouldn't work if I'm working a completely different deck, which is why the bottom one has a universal symbol of 4. That means that any resource that gets to 4 actually wins that card. Whereas the top, he needs a particular set when it's facing him. So, look at the top card, same thing. If that was facing me, I would have to get the 4 and the 3. He, on the other hand, would simply need to get a 6 to actually solve that one. So, that's how that works. There's obviously some flavor text. There's obviously some stuff that details how what happens on those cards. But just remember that's the basis. That's how you score. And if you score those, you get point values that are both on the card as well as some additionals. We're not even going to get into face-offs yet. We'll get there. But let me first go through the cards. How do you actually beat these? Well, the first one that you have is your main character. So, for instance, like over here, here's a main character card, Twilight, for instance. So, there's actually, on these cards, thank you, this is actually all one card. So, if you actually see, you have Twilight on one side and a different version on the back. This is the only card in the game that actually has two sides that are printed on. The rest have the standard game backing. So these are the main character cards that you're going to end up using in the game. And the main big thing is that you start with them, they have some defined powers, and that they actually level up or boost as the game progresses. So if you look over there, there's a boosted form. So the regular side has some information about how you boost, its home limit, how you actually move forward and play with those. Once you meet that, it flips over and becomes the boosted version, which actually has more power. So let's explain that, because this is going to be important for how you solve problems. If you look over there in the very top right-hand corner, you see a point value. On the regular version, it's 1. On the boosted version, it's 3. That's how many of that resource that character generates. So, for instance, Twilight is 1, boosted is 3. So she gets you 2 more resources once she boosts. So, that's the basis on that. There is obviously the flavor text, there's some of the details about how that card works down below it, but that's the main important thing you need to know, is that it increases and it boosts. So, let's see. There you go, more power, better effects. Good point. Alright, next up is friends. Friends are, well, they're who you summon. Think about it as like magic monsters, or they're things that you summon onto the board. So, for instance, we got a dash up there, as well as, I believe that's a Disco Inferno, or it's one of Pinky's ones. It's probably crazy. But as you can see, your friends can actually be part of the main 6. Matter of fact, you could even play Twilight Sparkle with Twilight Sparkle and Twilight Sparkle. It can happen. I don't know. It just happens. But they all have a similar thing to the first one. If you look at the top, they all have a particular value. They all have how much they actually generate. Here's Granny Smith. She generates 2 red. Dash up there generates 2 blue. Disco generates 1 pink. So, they all generate more, give you more resources so that you can win the problem. Now granted, unlike the main character, Disco Fever, thank you. Unlike the main character, you have to play these. So you have to have resources to actually be able to play them on the field. So, remember those point values I was talking about on these cards? Well, here's where they come into play. Each turn, you refill and you get that many points that are listed here. So, for instance, Granny Smith requires 2 points to play, as well as she already needs to have one of the apple resource on the table for her to be played. So, if there was no apple resources, this couldn't be played. If there was at least 1, then it can show up. But you would still have to pay the 2 to put it on the board. So, that's friends. We'll get into how they resolve in problem solving, how they get played as we go through the process. But just remember that they get played, they solve problems along with the main character. So, now we should be able to go faster through the next ones. Event cards, same thing. has a cost over there on the side, has requirements of what needs to be done to actually play them, and, you know, they're just events. They're things that happen, you can play, they could be interrupts, they could be additions, but there's something that just changes the field for your turn or during a face-off during any of the other parts of the game. So, those are pretty standard, what you would expect in a card game. Resources are like equipables, or short-term equipables. They are things that enter the field, can be attached to players, can be attached to face-offs, and they can give a permanent effect, whereas the actual events no longer give a permanent effect. So, you know, these, for instance, this one up here gives you the ability to put in the card, and then it reduces the cost of another card that you were just about to play. So, that's the basis of that one. I forget what Sweet Apple Acres does. But, you know, you can find any of these if you search. The My Little Pony group actually does include all the cards that you can see and view. So if you want to find out what any card does, you can easily find that on the wiki. Next. So, that's well and good. We've got all this stuff. We can have forward momentum. We know how to solve problems. But that's too easy. Because we got to make this a little bit harder for us. And how you do that is with Troublemakers. Characters that you can actually play to make it harder for your opponent, or maybe even you, to complete a problem. Same thing. These do not have a point value. You can play these as part of a specific Troublemaker phase before your actual before your turn to play. So, there's a Yellow Parasprite, there's also Nightmare Moon. There's only 2 cards in the game that, if you play as a Troublemaker, actually affects both players. Usually you play one and it affects the other player. Nightmare Moon, as well as another one, is one of the few that actually plays on top of the problem and affects both players at that problem. There is a point benefit, so if you beat the Troublemaker at that problem, you actually get some bonus points along with it. But generally, they just make the problem harder to solve, and they can slow you down. So, Troublemakers can end up being a big pain in your butt if you're trying to complete that problem. And, you know, for the most part, that's all the cards that are out there, unless I've made some enormous clerical error on my way on this resolution. So that is for the main part. Oop, go to this one. That's for the main part. Everything. Chat. Which is the other villain? Yes, that one. I can never say him. Daring Do's villain. Yeah, Althuzal. It affects both. So I can't say him for some reason. I don't know why. So, before we start and we play this a little bit, are there any questions that you guys have? Some of this will be handled as we play, so feel free to ask any questions along the way. We'll try and be a little bit verbal on exactly what we are doing, so you can get a better idea of what's happening. But let's see. Yeah, so essentially the Troublemaker cards are what you do to mess up usually your opponent, but sometimes Troublemakers are actually rather easy to beat. All you have to do is beat the point value up at the top of the card. And remember, if you beat a Troublemaker, you get the points off of it, and you just got to get to 15. So, sometimes that can be a